another Urban Jungles Radio production. In case you didn't know. All right, so thanks for joining us on the Urban Jungles Radio Show. I am here with Phil Bishop and Lucy Lawless. I am totally beside myself, so excited to have both of you guys on. Dr. Phil Bishop, it's definitely a real pleasure to have you on the show. I'm very familiar with your tireless efforts to save New Zealand frogs, and anyone who'll confess to being a frog talk prostitute is absolutely welcome here on our show.
Yeah, great, thank you.
We'd definitely love to spread the frog love here. And Lucy, of course, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm afraid I'm going to have to abandon all illusion of professionalism for a moment to tell you, at the risk of sounding like a complete fanboy, that I've been in love with you for years. And now that I know that you're working, now that I know you're working so hard towards spreading awareness on important conservation topics, I'm afraid I'm going to be forced to become one of your newest stalkers. So just be prepared. But it's great stuff. I'm kidding. In all seriousness, we love it when someone who can command the public's attention like you takes the incentive to really try to make a difference, especially on the conservation front. So nicely done. Obviously, I'm very curious as to how you two are working together on New Zealand's frogs.
Well, actually, I got to meet Phil. Phil and his wife, Debbie, invited me down to Dunedin, which is one of our southernmost cities in New Zealand, and to come and meet Jane Goodall when she was promoting her Roots and Shoots campaign and all her incredible work in Africa, to try to help. She's realised that the most effective way to get people interested in conservation, especially in poor countries like that, is you've got to do something for people, something for plants, and something for the animals in order to get the whole community and ecosystem working together in a really constructive way. So you can't just tell poor people not to predate or hunt or poach animals. You've got to get them busy doing something else. You've got to bring back the forest. You've got to give them incentives to do what we consider the right thing conservation-wise. Anyway, that's how I met Phil, so it was a great pleasure, and a lovely friendship has been born. He's an amazing, amazing authority on amphibians around the world.
Excellent. I have followed a lot of your work, very important work. I mean, New Zealand is unfortunately kind of a poster child for the loss of really unique endemic species. I can't imagine the warning signs that you're now seeing in one of our biggest yet most ignored bioindicators, which is, of course, amphibians. I mean, I'm sure, Phil, you are on the front lines of, ringing that alarm bell. And how hard of a job is that to get people to listen?
Yeah, it's pretty hard because amphibians are not really the most charismatic animals. Particularly even in New Zealand. We've got 4 native species here, and they're funny little brown frogs that don't tend to do very much. They don't croak, they just sit still. Most people in New Zealand would never see them. And then we've got these amazing charismatic birds like the kakapo, kiwi, and other big birds like that. And those are, people like birds anyway. Sure. And all the conservation dollars tends to go towards those large charismatic species, and the smaller ones get left behind. And it's like that the world over.
It is, unfortunately. Believe me, as reptile-friendly folk here, reptile and amphibian-friendly folk, we completely understand the battle sometimes. As here in the U.S., one of our biggest campaigns is against rattlesnake roundups. And you talk about the underdog. I mean, try convincing people that rattlesnakes are a good thing. And it's a very tough job. So I imagine you guys, just have an amazing job ahead of you as far as trying to explain what is going on to people, because I don't think people really take it as serious as it is. Obviously, amphibians are such important, they're so closely connected to our planet and our water cycles, and when we are seeing problems with them, it's definitely, red sign.
Yeah. Phil, would you I keep speaking about a number that you gave me once, that there was $140 million needed urgently in order to tackle or to even begin to countenance the imminent extinction of like 900 species. I might have got these numbers wrong. The money might have changed now, but it's about habitat loss and tissue, saving tissue. And tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a global problem, and that if we look at all our threatened species, we find that 9 out of 10 of those threatened species actually live in the tropical countries. And just to try and save those amphibians from extinction, because it's the most important class of vertebrates that are so seriously affected, with over 40% of all species of amphibians on the verge of extinction, we're sort of trying to get together a global movement to raise enough money to protect their habitats, protect them from disease, and do the critical research that we need in order to stop them disappearing off the face of the planet. So it's not just in New Zealand that we're focusing globally, and we've just launched a new group with a website called amphibiansurvivalalliance.org, and that's got all the information there.
I mean, 140 million, that is bloody chump change compared to what they are injecting into bullshit fossil fuel studies, things which are only going to fuel the extinction of, unfortunately, all of us, and reptiles who are so temperature dependent for, for producing females or males, are going to be so adversely affected. I mean, you could lose them within 10 years if it just got really hot.
And this is just talking about some of the factors that a lot of people don't even want to recognize, things like global warming per se. What about some of the more direct threats? Is chytridiomycosis an issue with New Zealand frogs?
It's not actually. We've done quite a lot of work, and most of our frogs are fairly resistant to chytridiomycosis in the lab. But how that is translated to what happens in the field, where they're also subjected to pesticides and poor air quality and pressures from living in suboptimal habitats and things like that, we don't really know. That it could be one of those cases where it's the sort of the last straw that breaks the camel's back. And if they're already immunosuppressed due to environmental conditions, then they might well succumb to chytrids in the wild. But certainly in the lab, where you keep them under fairly standard conditions, all of our native species have been able to shrug off chytrids.
Excellent. Now, I know New Zealand has been dealing with feral cats, feral rats, and other introduced mammals as being a big part of some of the adversely affecting factors in these animals. As far as frogs are concerned, where do feral cats come into play?
Well, cats, as you know, like to play with frogs. We do have a lot of feral cats in New Zealand, and we're currently fighting sort of a battle with the SPCA that they have a program called Trap, Neuter and Return. Right. So they actually catch wild cats, they neuter them, and then release them. And to me, that is almost as inhumane as euthanizing them, which is probably what they should be doing. But cats are serious predators, and they tend to eat a lot of our native animals, a lot of native lizards, and frogs as well.
Yeah. Are there any measures being taken right now to help control the issue?
Well, our Department of Conservation are quite good, and they look after their own crown lands, their conservation lands, and they often have programs where they'll go out and they'll shoot feral cats, they'll trap them and dispose of them, and there's no place for them there. I've got some really gruesome pictures of a feral cat's stomach, which had 43 rare and endangered skinks inside it. Wow. And that was its main diet.
Oh my God.
That's absurd. I mean, Lucy, you're seeing the effects. As you kind of hit the nail on the head a little while ago when you said that all this money is being pumped into these ridiculous bullshit things like, the oil industry. I mean, the money that the oil industry...
Or many things.
Yeah, or any of these. I mean, you have obviously tackled the oil industry head on. And we, of course, followed your amazingly awesome protest aboard Shell's oil drilling ships. And when you came on board and started blogging from 175 feet up in the ship, I thought that was just the coolest thing in the world. Can you give us kind of a quick run through of some of the things that you're seeing? Because I don't think people really understand the scale of operation of what's going on out there. Not to pull away from New Zealand or anything, but I mean, you've seen it firsthand.
What do you mean? What, in terms of oil exploration and climate change? What do you mean?
Yeah, in terms of oil explosion in general, I mean, you're seeing
I heard Joe Kernan on CNBC the other day talking about, we've got 1,000 years of, gas or something trapped under the USA. And I thought, oh my God, you're saying that like it's a good thing. Like, if we burn that, we're going to be dead in, couple of 100 years. Mm-hmm. There is no 1,000-year fossil fuel plant here. It's just madness that that we are looking at fossil fuels as the fuel to take us into the future. To quote a Shell ad, which I once, as a young bit actor, performed in, that was Shell. It's the I don't know, the fuel to take you into the future. No, this is the fuel that is going to doom us. And in less than 300 years, we can of burning fossil fuels on an industrial scale from like mid 1700s, right, we could ensure a complete collapse of world, not only the ecosystems that people talk about. They're worrying about taxes and immigration and stuff. You know what's going to happen in 60 years when there are, if there are 1 million climate refugees wandering around the planet? You know where all those Australians are going to be if Australia, the hottest, driest continent on the planet, gets another 4 degrees hotter, which is what they're now predicting? They're going to be in New Zealand. So wake up, New Zealand. You want to keep everybody's habitat, people's, frogs, snakes, lions, everybody's habitat great where they are, because otherwise they're going to be, flopping around the planet. And
we don't need any more Australians in New Zealand.
I got to say, I love them. I love my little Australian mates, but you want people to be able to live and keep their infrastructure and keep their little systems going in their own countries. You don't want people wandering around the planet looking for new homes forced to because of climatic devastation.
Here on the East Coast, we're seeing the popularity of hydrofracking taking over, which is just, it scares the living shit out of me because it's so close to our water tables. We have so many important water tables. Are you guys seeing the effects of this in New Zealand? Hydrofracking?
One very interesting thing last week was that Fonterra, which is the big dairy co-op, right? New Zealand, a huge part of our economy is dairy and agriculture. They are now refusing to take milk from farms where they're conducting fracking beneath them. Isn't that interesting?
That says a lot.
So it really does. I mean, Fonterra has a huge amount of well-resourced agro-scientists working for it. And in fact, nowhere else in New Zealand do you find that level of support for science, probably. But they made that decision. I think that's very interesting. I'd like to read more about it.
So what do you think are maybe like 2 of the top threats that are directly affecting the amphibian populations in New Zealand?
Certainly habitat destruction and introduced mammalian predators. We've got a whole sort of raft of mammals that live in New Zealand that have all been introduced, and our indigenous fauna have been here for 80 million years without mammals, so they just don't know what to do when a mammal comes across them. And most of the mammals that have been imported, things like rats and ferrets and weasels and possums, they hunt by smell, and the frogs in particular, their instinct is to sit still. So, that's the worst thing you can do, because you're going to get sniffed out, and they're getting eaten the whole time by nasty mammalian predators.
But Phil's actually an Englishman. You may be able to hear that. And you spent a lot of time in Africa, right, Phil?
I did, yeah.
He's a complete...
Yeah, I believe I remember reading. Yeah, he's an actual real scientist. Go figure.
He's the real deal.
I did read that about you, Phil, that you definitely did a lot of work in South Africa as well. I think you did a lot of cataloging work, especially, right?
Yeah, I started. It was at the time when amphibians people were just sort of thinking, are they starting to decline or what? And I felt that we actually didn't know that in Southern Africa. And I started a project called the Southern African Frog Atlas Project. And it was quite ambitious, because we tried to work out what species were in every quarter-degree grid cell of Southern Africa. And there's 22,000 quarter-degree grid cells. So it was a huge project. And we launched it to the public, and we told them that actually birding is really boring and old-fashioned, and you need to get out there and go frogging because it's much more exciting, and you can do it with a tape recorder. You don't have to get out of your expensive four-wheel drive. You can just drive up to a pond and record the frog calls and send that to us, and we'll work out what species there are and how many and how good the populations are. So it took over 10 years. And we mapped the whole of southern Africa, and we discovered 2 new species of frogs, and it was a really good sort of community science project.
Excellent.
Cool. Wow.
Lucy, were you like frog savvy before hanging out with Phil?
No, and I'm not savvy in any kind of animals, but I see that we humans are such, we're so intellectually lazy. We're so greedy, we're so apathetic that we are just going to let our planet and all the beautiful creatures within it go to hell in a handbasket, because we can't be asked changing. And we really have, the minute you make that change inside you to vote with your dollar, try to reduce your consumption of fossil fuels, you're already you're already working in your own best interest and your children. So, I'm flying as little as possible from my job, Skyping as much as possible. Don't take on jobs. I've been offered to work with like a rental car company, a national rental car company down here, an American airline, and an airline thing here. And I don't take money from those things, even if I do use them. And I drive a Prius. It still uses gas, and I hate that. I hate pulling into a gas station. But you still want to reduce. So you feel like a big fat hypocrite no matter what you do. But short of turning into a monk in a cave, just get out and start singing about conservation of all of us.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really I think people don't grasp the concept that it's not really just, something that we're all asking for, to do joking around. I mean, this is serious. I think we're going to see some major collapses in the next couple of decades, and the human population as a whole is going to be deeply in trouble. Wow. Yeah. So what are you working towards, in the future now? What are some of the projects you work on? I know you've been working with Greenpeace a lot, Lucy. Are you currently on any other campaigns?
No, I've just actually finished my community service for that. I did it in a dementia ward, and I just loved it. It was the best thing. They all came over to my house the other day. I had the rest home over to my house. I've maintained contact. I love these people. But unfortunately, climate change is going to be a lifelong battle. I wish I didn't have to do it, I wish I could go back and just be a bloody hoochie coochie actress and care about lipstick or something, but unfortunately I can't. So no, it'll just be a lifelong battle. Excellent. I guess.
Well, that gives me hope, the fact that you can recognize this, and it's not just kind of a short-term thing, because this is obviously going to be a lifelong battle, I think, especially, you having children. I have 3 kids of my own. Believe me, I know what it's like. It's a scary, scary thing to know that you're going to leave this behind. And one of the biggest things that scares me is the fact that I'm really afraid I'm going to have to show my kids frogs at a zoo or something, What's going to happen in 15, 20 years, and as far as
and all reptiles, all amphibians and reptiles just need love,
Yes, absolutely. That's what we'd like to hear. They do.
We're ugly. Love. We're ugly, and we need love. We need
protection. No, they're not ugly. They're just misunderstood.
Some of us are. It's like people. Some of us are, and we need love just like anybody else. So, they need our protection. So.
Well, that makes me happy that you definitely recognize that. Phil, what do you think, man? What's your outlook for the next 10 years? Is the public biting?
Yeah. No, they're not. It's, and it's going back to that thing that we were talking about earlier about it's really a good idea not to travel and to do lots of Skype meetings, but they do have their limitations. And we've got a big symposium coming up at the end of July in Baltimore, and it's the International Congress of Conservation Biology, and I'm running a frog symposium there. It's all about the state of the nation, what we can do about frogs. I've got 16 speakers that are coming in, and that's something that you can't do through Skype. We're going to get hopefully about 300 people coming and listening, and we're going to sit around and discuss how we can sort out the amphibian problem after the symposium. And hopefully I'll be filming all these and we'll be able to put them on the web as well, so that people who can't or don't want to travel can get a good handle and actually see that. But the future is bleak, and we've run an advert before that sort of has got these little kids talking to their dad, and they say, "Hey Dad, where were you when the frogs went extinct?" And it's sort of like that hopefully I'm not going to see that in my lifetime, but it is quite possible that we might see the extinction of a whole class of animals,
Phil,
unless we do something about it.
But what would happen to those ecosystems? They must be an enormous. We're going to have flies everywhere. What are the upshots?
Absolutely.
We're going to have terrible disease, pestilence, because frogs are keeping down those transmitters, right? Like flies.
Yeah,
and insects.
Absolutely.
Mosquitoes.
Yeah, mosquitoes, cockroaches, and you actually see that in places like Bangladesh, where they've actually shipped out so many of their frogs for the European food market. They have had to spend all the money they get on insecticides to kill the insects, because they've got a huge increase in insect-borne diseases like encephalitis and malaria. They've got a huge increase in insect crop damage. So they're just having to spray more insecticides on the environment because they don't have the frogs, and that'll actually stop any more frogs from growing up there anyway. So it's sort of a vicious cycle, and it's, I don't want to sound all doom and gloom, but it is very, very worrying.
What could
it
happen?
Is doom and gloom.
If Geico made that damn lizard famous, that lovely little gecko, the Geico gecko, we need somebody to take it on as a mascot. Like, I don't know, like Geico.
We believe in this.
Somebody has to give a damn about frogs somewhere in the world.
Absolutely. I mean, frogs, I beg to differ with you guys in the sense I think frogs are actually the more charismatic of the amphibian and reptile, the herp clan. And, I mean, they make spectacular poster children. Think about it. I mean, they are the most direct link, to our environment. Things happen to frogs that are going to be happening to us in about 10 years without a doubt. And I think too, people don't recognize how important they are as far as being a factor and indicating how healthy an environment is. When we're seeing these things like deformities and deaths and population crashes, it's red flags, but it's so hard to permeate to people's minds sometimes, and let them know this is serious shit.
Phil, was it you that told me about contraception pills in the water table?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Those are called they're environmental estrogens, and what happens is that the frogs actually change sex and they become demasculinized, and they start growing eggs in their testes and things like that. It's sort of chemical castration that, besides being painful for the frogs, it's also really bad for their populations, because male frogs that have been feminized they don't sing, so they don't attract mates, and then they can't fertilize females even if they could attract mates. So it's those little subtle things that are happening with amphibians, which you might not see anything wrong with the population when you look at them, but just slowly they're not recruiting young into that population, and the population will disappear, and people sort of turn around and think, I wonder why. And it's those little subtle things that are happening that we're just not aware of.
Wow, absolutely. And that's scary. It's some very island of Dr. Moreau stuff going on, and we're just not taking notice. Lucy, what out of all of these environmental factors, I mean, unfortunately, I think it's kind of like a curse when you become aware of what is happening in the world, because you can't sleep at night. At least I can't. And thinking of some of these things, what are some of the things that just piss you off the most? I mean, you have seen the whole gambit.
One thing that springs to mind, I hate people saying, "Oh, well, my kids are going to have to figure this out." That is an obscene thing for any parent to say, or to, just to abrogate responsibility. No. We don't need to pass this misery on to our kids, right? They're going to learn it in good time. But in the meantime, be advocating forcefully for the health of the planet in whichever way, strikes you best, whatever pulls on your heartstrings most, go for it. Greenpeace, Sierra Club, you guys, World Wildlife Fund, doesn't matter what it is, get involved, because we will be part of the solution.
I think our friend...
I think there's there's a really good expression that we should consider the planet not as a gift from our parents, but on them from our children.
Yeah.
And I think it was our good friend Jane Goodall who added to that and said that, there's that whole proverb about how we're borrowing the planet from our children, and she basically said, no, we're basically stolen it from our children at this point, and we need to give it back to them in much better condition than it really is. Well, it definitely
we've stolen it and broken it.
Yeah, exactly. We've stolen it, just beat the crap out of it, and be like, okay, now you figure it out. And that to me is absurd. It really is that we would even consider that. And like you said, it's the mindset that we're out there to change, but. Thankfully, you guys are working out there tirelessly to do that, because we need as much help as we can possibly get, especially those unsexy herps, according to Lucy.
Believe me, no. Well, believe me, no. Phil said that they're not the most charismatic. He doesn't mean that. I'm telling you, Phil is the most excited man about all living things, but in particular, herps, to use your word.
How many frogs have you kissed, Phil?
It's other people's perceptions he's talking.
I've probably got about 150 at the moment.
There we go. Good man. It takes a good man to literally love his work. Absolutely.
Phil's totally in love. Sorted by.
That's great. Well, I love everything I've heard tonight. You guys are phenomenal. Lucy, thank you so much for working so hard to get the word out. This is great. It gets me really excited to know that you're out there and you have the ability to affect people and change minds, and you're grasping it by the horns. You're not sitting by. I love the fact that you're just going up there and doing stuff. Keep doing what you do. You're just absolutely awesome. And Phil, same to you, man. Thanks so much for the tireless work you're doing, and best of luck. Maybe I'll come check you out in Maryland.
Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah, please do. I'll send you the details.
Excellent. Please do. And we'll pass it along. Before we go, any websites or anything that people can go to help out? Obviously, we need to get some money into somebody's hands, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We've got one that we've just launched, and it's a pretty exciting website, and it's amphibiansurvivalalliance.org.
Amphibiansurvivalalliance.org.
Yep, people should check that out.
We will post a permanent link up on our website on the front page. Make sure everybody gets there and gets this, because it's very, very important that we work on this right away. There's just no time to waste on this whatsoever. Thank you guys so much for joining me this evening. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you, Danny, and to you, Lucy.
Thanks, Bill. Bye, Danny. Bye.